Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 in our What If interview series, where we discuss and share knowledge on customer experience, digital transformation, and how to better serve customers via digital channels. So my name is Tracy Greer. I'm the head of marketing for Mando, and we're a digital agency committed to simplifying digital experiences for everyone. So we work within regulated industries with companies like utilities and financial services, focusing on helping your customers to do those tasks they don't really want to do. So we don't all wake up on a Saturday morning excited about paying our water bill or submitting an insurance claim. And we like to make these experiences easier, giving customers time back to do the more exciting things in their lives. So today's episode, we're discussing what if your current marketing efforts will never deliver effective personalisation, with today's guest, digital strategist and experience director for Mando, Jonathan Seal. Before we get started, just to let you all know, we've also got my colleague Sarah on the call with us too. Sarah's going to be helping with logistics and monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions or comments, please be sure just to send them in on those chat windows, and Sarah will be able to ask the questions at the end of the discussion. So we'll chat for around 20-25 minutes-ish, and then we'll move on to any questions or comments after that. So welcome to today's guest, Jonathan. So if you can just start off, Jonathan, by introducing yourself, your background, and just telling us all a bit more about what you do at Mando.
Hi, Tracy. Okay, yes, so my day job, if you like, is I'm experience director for Mando. That means that I'm ultimately on the hook, responsible for all the experiences that our customers get when they're using the digital products that we create. My background has been, I've been in digital for all my career, that's over 25 years. So started off on things like CD-ROMs, doing everything from database programming, graphic design, video production, producer, project manager, at a time when you really had to do kind of everything, a bit of everything. So then I got more interested in the whole area of information architecture and user experience. So set up and worked with a little UX agency for a little while. Then got far more interested in the whole idea of digital strategy and helping businesses to realize, what they were trying to achieve in terms of business objectives using digital tools. So started down the sort of consulting route. Got involved with Mando about 10 years ago, helped set up a consulting function there. And now as a result, I oversee those kind of functions. So that's everything from strategy, business analysis, user experience, insights, design, front end, basically everything which forms the sort of the coherent experience that customers interact with before it gets integrated into our products and platforms and so on. So that's, if you like, my day job and a bit of potted history. I tend to speak quite a bit at on webinars like this and at events and conferences on a whole bunch of different areas of digital because of the sort of background and the kinds of clients I've interacted with. And personalisation is a particular interest to me, partly because I also sit on the British Interactive Media Association's Council for Artificial Intelligence, which means that I get to talk to a lot of really, really clever people about how machine learning and how that artificial intelligence is beginning to impact on different parts of society, including things like the world of digital and personalisation. So I wouldn't profess to be a deep expert on personalisation as such. I work with it at Mando. I work with the tools, I work with the clients that want it, I work with the teams that implement it. And I suppose because of that AI connection and the algorithms that then drive it in a lot of cases, I'm fascinated by that connection between the sort of the shiny tools and the messy human behaviors that kind of butt up against them and sometimes make it not work as we might expect.
Great, that's really great, John. Thank you. Really exciting and interesting field that you work in there.
It absolutely is, yeah, fascinating.
So if you read any guide to customer experience, or you speak with any of the big platform vendors, they'll always mention personalization as being part of the holy grail of customer communications. So if you can just start off by outlining why you think there is a business case for this and why it's been so attractive.
Yeah, sure. I think the reason, well, to understand the reason why it's such an obsession, if you like, with marketers, we need to understand what it is that's driving that, and it's very practical, tangible things underneath it that's driving it. Ultimately, marketers are looking at helping their businesses drive more revenue at lower cost to drive higher profits. That's the sort of the baseline that we're all kind of ultimately working to. So whether that's through higher engagement, whether that's through faster conversion process, the expectation is that personalization, if we get it right, is able to drive those outcomes. So the logic chain, I think, that's being followed here is pretty sound. It's that if you think about audience segmentation, you take a whole group of people, you say, if I'm able to look at this group differently to this group, and there's sufficient differences between them, and I can talk to that group in a more coherent way, and then that group in a more coherent way, I should get a better outcome. That's driven, segmentation for years in traditional marketing. So personalization is about taking that further and saying, okay, if I understand the audience more and more and more, I can adjust my messaging, I can adjust my tactics, I can adjust my offers, even my products that I kind of create in a way that's more appropriately tailored to that audience. And as we get down and down and down, we get to the point where we're talking to an audience of one. And if I know that audience so well that I can communicate really clearly with them, then I should have a more effective way of interacting. And I suppose if we move even beyond that, the ideal is that we're then in this world of hyper-personalization, or there's various different terms for it, when we're not just talking to that audience of one, we're talking to that audience of one at a moment in time, on a particular device, in a location, in a particular emotional context or a social grouping or whatever, so that we can tailor it and hone it so it's as effective as possible. So that's why it's really attractive, because the idea is we can begin to address that problem that's been there for a really long time, which is that if you were interacting with me, if you had a shop, say, and I came into your shop, you could very easily size me up very quickly and say, okay, I can see that this person's about this old, they're probably in this kind of demographic group because of the clothes they're wearing, and as soon as I open my mouth, you could get more information about me. If I visited beforehand, you could tell more about me again. All that's really, really powerful for being able to tailor the experience that you give, and hopefully end in a better conversion process or whatever you're trying to get out of that interaction. But as we move into the online world, that becomes more and more difficult because we're more detached. So personalization, the holy grail, if you like, of that personalization is it reforms the human connection that is kind of somewhat missing between brands and customers in this online space. So I was actually talking to our head of strategy a couple of days back, and she used the phrase, true personalization can't be seen, it's about building a relationship. And I think that's a really good quote.
Yeah, definitely. And it's being led by all the digital leaders, isn't it? So the likes of Amazon, they've been dabbling in personalization for years, haven't they?
Absolutely. And if you think about, if you're old enough like me to remember, the web pre-Amazon, they were very flat experiences. They were very, you went to a shop, you browsed around the shop, and then at the end of that, you either found what you wanted, bought it, or you didn't. Amazon came along and found the way of recommending things based on what you were browsing and what you were looking at and what you'd already bought previously. And it made a massive, massive difference. You suddenly felt like, as a consumer, you were understood, you were seen, you were heard. Yeah,
exactly. And what impact do you think this has historically had on customer loyalty?
So if I'm honest, I think it's mixed. Because when we started to talk about personalization, however many years ago, we didn't really have the models, we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the technologies, we certainly didn't have the data in the same way as we do now. And now, of course, we've got all these amazing platforms, all these tools, and we're awash with data. But personalization still is a bit hit and miss, and it's really difficult for businesses to realize it well. So a lot of companies talk about personalization, but they can't actually tell you that much about the customers, and they can't actually do much with the data that they do hold. So I think for a reason it's a mixed picture for me is I think people don't actually care, if you like, about personalization as such. They care about a great experience. So if we think about an analogy of watching a film, so I like horror. I don't know, you might like world cinema, you might like romance, I have no idea. But you go to a cinema and you choose a film based on that preference that you've got, but you don't expect the film to be personalized to you. You expect it to be the film that they've made. Because aside from all the logistical challenge of trying to do that, a film, if it's a good film, contains like universal human truths. It's set up to speak and resonate with us on a human and personal level. So the first and foremost priority is getting really good content right. I mean, I think so. Was it a couple of weeks ago you had John Field from Episerver on,
That's
and he was
right, yeah.
talking about content, the importance of getting good content and communicating with good content. And that's still 100% true. No matter what you do with personalization, the basis of it is get your content really good. So when personalization is done well, the evidence is that it can definitely work. I think Salesforce did some research and they found that 58% of customers said that personalized experiences were more likely to lead them to, were really important to them when they were buying from a company. And we know that of any factor, including price, customer experience is the most important criteria when predicting repeat revenue for a business. So it's a massive factor. So if personalization is seen as important for experience, and experience is critical for that repeat revenue, you got to take it seriously, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about examples of personalization that work well, there's a couple of really good examples. So Spotify, I'm sure you, like me, you've used Spotify and you interact with it. It's got some really compelling account-based features. So you can really easily create playlists and all those kind of classic things that you do with it. You can adopt recommendations. It will be feeding in suggestions based on that, that you can then very easily weave into your sort of rotations. So all those interactions and choices I make as I'm working through it build up this whole sort of digital footprint of me to Spotify, and they use that footprint to then feed me the drug, the addictive drug that then means that I use the product more and more. Essentially, I get that value from Spotify of feeling that I'm understood, that it's my kind of music, because it literally is. I built it with them. And it becomes a real barrier for me to then want to move anywhere else, because why would I want to lose all that preference, all that insight that's been built up? It's a value exchange in that instance. That's where it works really well, that service level personalization. I think for product, you've got things like, obviously we've had the Coke with the share a Coke bottle and things like that, the Nike AD trainers, all those kind of good things. But what's happening in those instances is the customers do all the work, right? The product personalization, you're choosing it yourself. If you think about an online car configurator, you're doing all the work of configuring the car, but you still end up feeling like it's a personalized experience, because you've gone through the effort, you've put the effort in, you've got that sort of ownership bias, if you like, of having gone through that process. So they're really, really good, those product personalization, service personalization. But I think the reason I say it's a mixed picture is I think when marketers are typically talking about personalization, they're talking about content personalization and communication personalization. And I think in that area, it's probably a little bit more problematic. It's more difficult to tailor the experience of someone navigating around a digital estate, around a website, and create really good outcomes, because you've got a load of, the expectation, I suppose, is that you've got a load of data, you throw it at a system, and somehow it magically comes out with a personalized experience. And we know that actually there's a lot of effort that has to go in to make that kind of thing done well.
Exactly, yeah. And you've mentioned there a couple of really great examples of how personalization has worked. And we know that there are some organizations out there who are just getting it spot on and making the customer feel like the company really cares about them and knows about them, and delivers that highly targeted messaging. But we also know that there are so many companies that are just getting this completely wrong. They're implementing it for the sake of it because they think they should, but they have not really much idea on how to do it properly. A couple of stats we mentioned on our sign up page, 2 in 5 users said most personalized messages that they receive still feel like mass marketing, which is, it's an issue. And 80% of marketers will abandon personalization efforts by 2025 due to a lack of ROI, the perils of customer data management, or both. That was a Gartner statistic from a recent research report. So we know that there's some good examples, some not so great examples, and we know that, I'm sure we've all had bad examples of personalization sent to us, and there's disillusionment around personalization as well. So what do you think that's based around, and why do you think it has become a growing problem and it is a challenge for companies?
Yeah, it's a good shout. So the disillusionment, I think to quickly close off on the disillusionment around the customer side of things before we go on to the disillusionment of the marketers who are actually trying to deploy these situations. I think if personalization is done really well, you get that experience as an end customer of it's almost like a magic trick. You know, it's like this beautiful thing where you don't know how it's done, but you feel like, oh wow, that's impressive. Over time, that becomes sort of wears off, and it sets the almost like the hygiene factor. I get that. But if it's done badly, it's almost like you see how the magic trick's done. It's really disappointing. You know, if the first time you sort of see an email message where it says dear hashtag first name, hashtag last name, you know, that makes you feel, you know, they really don't care about me. I'm just a number to you. And I think that's where it becomes a real disillusionment for customers, you know, as a starting point. So for marketers, I think the disillusionment, it comes out of a couple of places. Because the belief has been there that, you know, if I collect as much data as I can, if I'm as granular as possible in understanding my audience, and then I throw this at the technology, it'll work. I think the disillusionment is coming out of the fact that we're beginning to realize that, first of all, the issue of trying to store, collect, maintain, manage, and consolidate that data is hard. You know, there's some difficulties around that, and do that well. And having a good data strategy is important, all that sort of stuff. The second is that the customers themselves are becoming a lot more kind of assertive around, you know, what it means to own and have their data rights and privacy in place. So we're getting a lot more pushback from that, which is meaning that it's starting to lose some of the appeal, because you're having to spend money on managing those things. And then technology solutions, they're impressive, and they might well be capable of delivering on those experiences, but there's a lot of resources and hurdles that we need to put in place to make it workable. So if you think about those kind of in turn, the data side of things, so GDPR has obviously had a massive impact, and there are equivalent pieces of legislation around the world. It's not universal, but the trend is definitely towards more control, more protections being in place.
Absolutely.
So that has some factors. You know, if you think about the number of data breaches that get reported, the number of fines that get reported in the media, businesses are becoming a bit more cautious about how they use that data, and it's starting to become a bit less of a Wild West now in terms of how customers' data is being used. So that's one thing. And then that making businesses begin to question the ROI, I suppose, a little bit around, you know, why are we collecting this data if we're not going to be able to do something meaningful with it? So let's just not do it, because then it saves on all that kind of worry and fear of legislation and litigation. So the second part is around the customers, and then the way that they're becoming a bit more savvy about stuff. Because businesses are reporting that concerns about customers' data privacy is one of their top 3 kind of critical factors, because trust is such a big deal. We know that that's causing some knock-on behaviors. So you look at things like device manufacturers and browsers, and they're starting to build in a lot more privacy, a lot more anonymized sort of behaviors, a lot more reduction of the tracking capabilities that people can apply. They're blocking third-party cookies, they're preventing retargeting. There's all sorts of these little incremental evolutions that are making it a bit harder to gather all this data as a business to then do something meaningful with. So the first time in a while, we're seeing the balance of power, if you like, shift a little bit in favor of consumers and privacy, and rather than in favor of collecting all this data and doing whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
And then finally on the technology, I think it's fair to say that the platforms themselves are genuinely impressive. I mean, because I work a little bit with the people who do algorithms and work on what's possible. And so there's some really clever stuff baked into these tools, but it's also really difficult to get the benefit. If you think about, so say we were trying to create a site aimed at doing holiday destinations. So we think, okay, so whether you're male or female might influence the way that we want to personalize messages to you. Whether you've got kids or not might do the same. Where you sit on like an income spectrum, so we might band that into 4 bands, and then we might say you're very adventurous on one side, you might be very conservative on another, and somewhere in between you've got maybe 5 different categories there. So instantly, if we were trying to personalize on that basis, we've got 2 times 2 times 4 times 5 permutations that we're trying to look at, and you add in more factors, and it just goes up exponentially. So there's a complexity there that we need to get our heads around. And I think while you can use machine learning to plug some of those gaps, I think the reality is, you know, there's a lot of effort that still needs to be put in to maintain the rules, to try and decide what content should be seen, to figure out how you evolve those over time and iterate them and so on. So it's quite a big deal, I think, getting that right.
Absolutely. So with all that in mind, you know, with the theory that personalization is a good thing, it improves customer experience, it's something that we should be striving to do, set against the, you know, everything you've just mentioned about the challenges and the difficulties of it. What's next for personalization? Where do you see it heading, and how can companies get it right?
Okay, yeah. So there's definitely. I want to make it clear. I'm in favour of personalisation. I'm not someone who's saying don't do personalisation at all.
It's
I
just
think
learning how to get over the challenges, isn't it, and doing it
exactly.
right.
Yes, it's approaching it with the right mindset and going into it with your eyes open. That it's, you know, there are challenges to be addressed. 100%. If we think that there are, you know, if we approach it and think, oh my goodness, it's too costly, too complex. There's all this issues of, you know, the data being wrong, and then okay, I get that it's kind of quite a scary prospect to walk into, but I think it's about being much more intentional about what we mean by personalization and focusing on the kinds of personalization that actually will add value to our organization. Because we're not all Amazon, we're not all Spotify. You know, we have different kinds of organizations with different challenges. So I suppose in this context, and certainly with the kinds of organizations that we deal with, typically, you know, utilities, financial services, I'm more interested in the sort of more explicit personalization. I'll come on to what I mean by that, and a little bit less interested in all the sort of algorithms and that side of things, because you can do a lot with just asking customers what they want you to personalize on the basis of. So there's a concept which is sort of emerging of zero-party data. So as marketers, you'll be very familiar with the terms of your first-party data and second-party data and third-party data, where and they've all got different challenges and joys about them. So first-party data I've collected on my own site. I know how you're browsing, how you're behaving, what you're buying, that kind of thing, because I've stored it myself. I've understood what you're doing. I might not understand exactly why you're doing it, but I can at least get a picture of what you do. So that's one. Second-party data, then sort of partners, affiliates that I'm interacting with directly. Maybe I'm part of a group structure, and so, you know, you've browsed on another partner website to do with that group. All good. Third-party data becomes problematic because we've got all the GDPR issues. A lot of the time it's purchase data, it's aggregated, sometimes it's built up from algorithms themselves, which got loads of bias and issues baked into it that isn't particularly right. So sometimes that can cause problems. And the reason that zero-party data kind of gets away from that is it's focused much more on saying, if you give us this information, we will give you this thing in value exchange in return.
Yeah.
And it's really clear and really controlled by the customer to say, I am willing to give you my email address on the basis that you're going to use it to personalize my experience on the site and send me this white paper that I want to receive. It's almost like a contractual trade. So it becomes a lot cleaner from sort of GDPR and data protection purposes, because you're not sort of saying, I'm spying on you and I'm trying to gather as much as I can about you. You're being very open about it, very transparent, and saying, I think there's value in you giving me this and I'll give you this. Are you up for that? Great. Yes, let's carry on. So I think there's some interesting work that's being done on zero-party data and looking at that. So yeah, for example, anything where you're explicitly asking for a response, like a survey or a questionnaire, or even just saying, if you choose this navigational option, you're going down this route and we're going to use it to personalize the rest of your experience on the site. That's a way you can do the same kind of principle. And it's subtly different to first party, but I think it's a more probably realistic and approachable way of tackling personalization as a starting point than I think trying to throw everything into some kind of clever, intelligent engine and hope it comes up with something good.
So it's about starting small and still using those same tech platforms that, you know, claim to be great at personalization, but it's just doing it from a different angle and actually getting the information directly from the customer rather than from observational behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, you can combine the two. I'm not saying don't use your analytics data of what people are kind of browsing around to personalize things.
So augment it with that data.
Absolutely. And just be as transparent and open with the customer about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because I think one of the reasons that we've had this sort of this slump, you know, in the sort of Gartner hype cycle where you have the, you know, the initial surge and then it goes to the trough of despair. I think one of the reasons that personalization has been kind of a bit stuck there for a while, and the reason why I'm so excited about this concept of personalization 2.0, if you like, is because that model of personalization actually, although it's simpler in a way, it actually removes a lot of the headaches and problems that have kept us in that slump, because there's a lot less GDPR and regulatory issues. It builds trust. It requires a lot less data to achieve it. There's a lot less technical problems in trying to make it real. So there's a load of good things which come out as a result. I don't know if I think Tracy's frozen.
I'll jump on and take over from Tracy. Thank you so much, John. Just while Tracy unfreezes, I think we're just going to move on and just wrap up kind of before we move on to the questions. So before we move on to some questions, I just wanted to ask you one thing. Whilst we keep our webinars conversation-led, exploring the key issues, we also like to focus on the practical suggestions which can be implemented to help our viewers excel. So we've got some great companies listening today. And with that in mind, what would you say were your 3 tips for marketers who are looking to better engage with their customers and who are looking to deliver outstanding customer experience? If you can just give us like your 3 top tips, that would be great.
3 top tips. Okay, so I think the first would be treat your personalization strategy seriously. It's not about what fun or interesting thing can I personalize. We're looking for tangible business benefit ultimately. So let's be realistic about what personalization can achieve for your business, where in your digital estate it makes sense to deploy it. It might not be in the obvious shiny way. So a really simple example I've seen of this is, so Very, the clothing company, they looked at the customer's IP, so their address, their geolocation. They used that to do a weather lookup, and then as a result of the weather lookup, they then personalized the sort of landing experiences. So as you were browsing around the site, it was offering you clothes that were a bit more appropriate to the weather that you're experiencing right now, because they recognize that that's a very transactional sort of factor in, I might be going online and that will have an effect on my psychology and what I'm thinking. So it might not be a big, shiny, kind of cool thing that's really obvious. It might be something that's done a bit in the background and just subtly makes things better. So that would be tip 1. Tip 2 would be don't underestimate the human side of this. It's the technologies are really good and they can help you assemble that experience into something really compelling, but you've still got to make sure that the rules are right. The principles on why you're personalizing in certain ways are set up correctly. Your goals are clear, all that kind of stuff is critical. And then finally, I think I would say, because I've focused a little bit on the 0-party data at the end, I would say think about what explicit personalization can do. Can we personalize based on things the customer is actually telling us, rather than things that we're trying to sort of infer or consolidate all this clever data together? So get started in that way might be a good way to do it. So anything from on-site questionnaires that actually then you're using the outcomes of that questionnaire to actually drive the outcome.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think the importance of it's quite interesting when you say about Very, because I know when the sun is shining, I want to be thinking about dresses, but I don't want to be thinking about them when it's raining and you're thinking, oh, it's so cold, I want my jumpers. So yeah, it's really interesting. Great. So thank you so much for your time, John. It's been really insightful. And I just have a few questions that have come in, which I'll just go through with you now. So how do you think personalization would have helped during COVID? If people have implemented it before that, how do you think it would have helped?
Wow, yeah, good one. So I suppose one factor that we've been talking about quite a lot, Mando, about the impact of COVID is we deal with vulnerable customers a lot. So the kinds of businesses that we deal with, so utilities, financial services, they have a lot of customers, very broad demographic, and vulnerability is something that they're all kind of very hot on and very interested in. In COVID, everyone, the buzzword is everyone's become vulnerable now. We're all in situations where actually there's some vulnerability there. So there's a real potential for personalization to be used in that way to start saying, okay, if we can identify the kinds of behaviors that indicate some level of vulnerability, or we're explicitly being told there's a vulnerability, we can actually start to tailor the experiences to support those customers better. So that's one kind of clear thing. Another thing, I suppose, is around the proactivity of communications. Again, I was having a conversation with our head of strategy, and we were talking about the way that financial services will regularly sort of deal in terms of fraud prevention. Things like you'll get proactive comms saying, oh, we noticed this has happened in your account. Was this you? Type thing. You don't get that so much in terms of, you know, your home working life. You don't get someone sort of saying, oh, we noticed you're using a bit more electricity than normal because of COVID. Are you having, you know, do you think you might have an issue with your bill payment? In which case, here are some ways that we can support you. Or you're not seeing those kinds of behaviors so much. And I think there's a real opportunity to personalize based on some of the challenges that COVID has thrown up.
Definitely, and preempting the problem and the questions that are going to be asked, and just making it as easy as possible, because everyone knows during this situation we haven't found it easy, and if we can make it as easy as possible for our customers, builds customer loyalty, and that's what it's all about.
And those brands will win, 100%.
Exactly. Well, I think I'll just quickly hand over back to Tracy to just say and wrap it all up, but thank you so much for joining us, and Tracy, back over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. I don't know what happened there, technology, eh? So yeah, thanks so much, John. It's really, really interesting discussion. I did miss the last couple of minutes, but I'm sure that you answered everybody's questions there. So thanks again for joining us today.
Very well.
Yeah, the joy of recording, at least you know it's live anyway. Thanks everyone, take care.